Well, hello. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new here. This video is going to be a little different from my normal videos. I have mentioned that this was in the works for quite some time. I've been thinking about making this for a good long while, and I've been mentioning that I was actively working on it, I think since January. It is the end of April. It is April 29th, so I'm a little late with it. But today I want to talk about something that is a little bit more serious: how abusive relationships are portrayed in fiction. The good, the bad, and the harmful. I don't think I have the ability to do an actual fundraiser on a video, but I will have a link down below for donations. So definitely check that out if you are financially able and feel so inclined to give a couple of bucks to help survivors of abuse. A lot of people are not as fortunate as I was. I was technically homeless when I left my situation, but I did have family in the same city as me who were able to put me up in a guest room until I found my own place. I had a decent job, making enough money to afford not a nice apartment, but to afford a place of my own. Not everyone is so fortunate, and I would love to help out as many people as possible. I will be focusing on 5 books today, 4 of which I think talk about this topic very well. A Dowry of Blood, Bad Romance, In the Dream House, and Annie Bot. And then a 5th example that I think tried but didn't do it so well, and that is It Ends With Us. I just want to explore how these books reveal red flags, dispel or uphold false narratives about abuse, how manipulation works, and how some stories validate survivors, while others maybe unintentionally reinforce very dangerous myths. And I will be talking about my own experience as well. Definitely content warnings. We'll be talking about all these things. If this is something that is triggering for you, maybe come back to this at a different time when you are able. But I really want this to be a conversation for survivors, as well as for those who maybe aren't survivors but want to understand and have a better understanding of these things. And just for anyone who believes we deserve honest, realistic storytelling when talking about abuse. And I want to start with my list, maybe not a fully comprehensive list, but a list of some common false narratives about abuse. Most of them you've probably heard, and if you're being honest with yourself, you probably have thought or said at least one of these things at some point. Being honest, I used to have some of these misconceptions about abuse and what it means to become a victim of abuse and leaving versus not leaving, all of that. We have the ever prevalent, why don't you just leave? I would just leave. As well as related to that, it could never happen to me. I wouldn't tolerate that. I'm not a weak pushover, so I would never be in that kind of a situation. It wouldn't be possible for me. It's impossible for someone like me to end up like that because I'm so outspoken and strong and opinionated. I definitely had some of those misconceptions prior to my experience, and I'll talk more about that. Some other ones: he seems like such a nice guy. She must be exaggerating. I've never seen him be angry or crazy. She's clearly dramatic, lying. She's crazy. She's trying to tarnish his reputation out of spite. They looked like they were so in love, or she even said she was so in love. So she has to be making this up now. This just seems to have come out of nowhere, what she's claiming. If there's no physical violence, it is not abuse. Or if there isn't enough physical violence, then it doesn't really count as physical abuse. And one that frustrates me to my core: if you truly love yourself, you will be able to avoid narcissistic abusers because they target People who are just deeply insecure and do not love themselves and think that that's the love they deserve. If you know you deserve better love, you can't possibly end up like this. Fucking false. Again, prime example right here. Abuse is often invisible. It doesn't always leave bruises that you can see. Sometimes it straight up doesn't leave bruises that you can see. But it absolutely still leaves wounds inside. Very deep wounds. And abusers aren't villains in some cartoon, mustache twirling, evil monsters that everyone can spot from a mile away. That's not what narcissistic abusers are. Quite the opposite. They are often incredibly charming, beloved by everyone, trusted by everyone in their life, except for the person that they hurt behind closed doors. And leaving is not as easy as, this behavior is mean and hurtful to me, so therefore I'm packing a bag and leaving. It isn't that simple. It feels like it should be. And if you're not in it, and especially if you've never been in it, it feels like just leave. I don't understand. I felt that way before. I would get frustrated seeing friends stuck in these situations and get kind of upset with them and like frustrated with them. Like, stop talking to me about your shitty relationship unless you're gonna leave. Just leave. Break up with him. Oh my God. And it is not that easy. By the time the cycle of manipulation, trauma bonding, gaslighting, and just overall fear has wound its web within you, leaving feels impossible. It doesn't feel like a thing that you have the option of doing truthfully. And becoming a victim of abuse is not about intelligence nor about strength. It's about being psychologically trapped through fear, false love, and manipulation. And some, once again, not a comprehensive list, but some red flags to pay attention to, some red flags I ignored, or not even ignored, but just didn't even recognize as being red flags, and that some of these books do really, really well and showcase really well, and one does not. Just common early signs of abuse and someone who's going to be abusive down the line, and it's going to get worse. This one we've all heard, love bombing. And love bombing, I think that's it was hard for me. I'm a hopeless romantic. I get so swept up in my feelings, and I'm fearless when it comes to romance. I kind of always have been, because I've always been like, it's not gonna kill me. Like, I've been through divorce. I've been through so many breakups, heartbreaks. Oh my God. And you get over it. You always get over it. I always get over it. It's not going to break me. And I like that I have that fearlessness. I don't want to be fearful and afraid of love, but I was fearless to my detriment of just being like, it'll be fine. And convincing myself that the butterflies I was feeling was real, deep, true love and compatibility. And even outside of the abusive relationship, that was just a pattern I had of just diving headfirst. And in most cases, just getting to a point of like, oh, maybe I don't actually like them as much as I thought, or I'm realizing now that we're not as compatible as I thought, but like I'm kind of deep in it, and like staying in some certain relationships longer than I like realistically should have, like just for how I was feeling. But in this case, obviously, it was very detrimental because he was a narcissistic abuser and I got fucking sucked in. And love bombing isn't just being nice in the beginning. It is like over the top, making you feel like, oh God, you're just so special and you're so different from anyone. And like, I care about you so much and this feels so different from anything else that I want to do things like way too early, introduce you to my family 2 weeks into us knowing each other, or things like that. And I think that was also kind of a problem for me. I come from a very small podunk town where you already know people's family. All my little boyfriends I had in high school, like I knew their parents because I went to school with them since kindergarten. And I would always have my little boyfriends like come hang out. Most of my boyfriends I had in high school were my like cousin who was in the same grade as me, his friends and our friends. So like they were always around my family and it just didn't seem like a big deal. As an adult now though, jumping in like that, it's alarming and not the best when it's coming from oh, you're just so different and so special and amazing and I just want to like infuse you into every aspect of my life immediately. That's maybe they're not necessarily a narcissistic abuser, maybe, but like pay attention. Let that be a warning sign. Another one that is, I think, pretty obvious is being controlling who you see, where you go. I think that though there's sometimes where it's subtle and so you don't notice it, or their justification for not wanting you to go hang out with these people or go to this place, they explain it in a way where you're like, okay, you're not just being a controlling jerk, it's because you just want to spend so much time with me, or whatever the case may be. It's something that you feel like, oh no, that's just them being nice. And in reality, it's them not wanting you to have a life outside of them. Justifying cruelty in general, and justifying, obviously, they're justifying physical violence or aggression, but even like physical intimidation, towering over you, backing you into corners, things like that, coming at you in a physically aggressive way, even if they don't touch you, is unacceptable. And there should not be any justifying that. Making you feel guilty for having your own friends or hobbies and being suspicious of your friends and your time spent doing your hobbies. In my case, starting BookTube. He thought that was something to be suspicious of. I was clearly trying to fuck people by starting a BookTube channel. It's funny now. In the moment, it was not funny at all. And another thing is the up and down. Apologizing profusely, having moments of tenderness and guilt and remorse immediately after doing something shitty, but then later kind of dismissing it, being like, nah, it wasn't that bad, justifying it. Oh, I mean, I'm sorry, but it wasn't as big of a deal as you're making it out to be now. Like, get over it. That type of shit, bad news bears. Making you responsible for their moods or their anger. You're pushing their buttons. If it wasn't for you, they wouldn't get like this. Expecting you to be their peace. Please, for the love of God, let that be a fucking red flag. Immediate warning sign. Someone saying, especially a man telling a woman, if you're in a heterosexual relationship, a man telling you that you should be his peace. If you dare criticize him, if you dare have an issue with him and bring it up and want to have a difficult conversation about his behavior or about something going on in between the two of you, and his reaction to that is, you're stressing me out, you're supposed to be my peace, I want my girl to be my place of peace and my home, my safe space, huge fucking red flag. That's a red flag to the point, I feel, of just dip right then. There's no reasoning with that. Get the fuck out. Not that you should be chaotic for someone, but like I'm saying, just bringing something up, bringing up bad behavior, wanting to talk about this, pointing out their shitty behavior, and that being, oh, you're disrupting my peace. You're disrupting my peace, actually. Get the fuck out of my face. And using their trauma as an excuse, especially if they're not going to seek any professional help for healing from their trauma. I think, in my experience anyway, definitely, my abusive ex, as well as several other exes I had that weren't like abusive necessarily, but like one definitely had two of them actually definitely had love bombing tendencies and were liars to their core and were taking advantage of me. Like, they all have deep childhood trauma, lots of childhood trauma. That can be a explanation for someone's behavior. Yes, I get that why you are behaving this way is likely mostly because of all this unhealed trauma you have, but it is not an excuse Explanation does not equate to excuse or justification. And on that note, someone who clearly needs therapy to deal with their shit, even outside of like being in a romantic relationship, just for themselves, they really should get therapy, but they refuse to even discuss it. They vehemently push back against the idea of therapy. They don't need it. It's not for them. They're fine. You're just trying to make them feel crazy or like something's wrong with them. Things like that, let that be a red flag. And pay attention to the cyclical patterns, the ups and downs. All relationships are gonna have moments of difficulty. Interpersonal relationships in general do. Certainly romantic relationships. You're gonna have difficult conversations. You're gonna have arguments occasionally. But it shouldn't be this like cyclical pattern consistently. It should be few and far between. Most of the time, you should be happy and fulfilled and satisfied and feeling loved and genuinely cared for and safe emotionally, mentally, and physically. Even in those difficult conversations and arguments, you should feel safe. And pay attention to how you feel in those moments and pay attention to how frequently it's happening. I started keeping a journal of like kind of letters to him of like how I felt about certain things and like fights we'd have and how I felt after that. And like after the relationship, that was a big thing that helped me like move past it finally a few months after I had left. I was over it. I wasn't going back to him, but like I was still struggling with like having moments of like missing him and like I was still struggling a little bit. And then I went through that journal and just saw it was like over the course of a few years where I was just like, dude, it's like it was like every other week a huge blowout crazy town Twilight Zone fight and argument and like just bad times all the way around. Yeah, I lived all of these in that relationship. I was with that person for 5.5 years, lived with him for the last like year and a half of it, and I excused the manipulation because he could be kind and apologetic and gentle when he wanted to be. Abusers are very good at making all of these things very subtle and very confusing. They're very good at using their words and their justifications to confuse you. They're good at the apology and the honeymoon period after an apology of, oh, things are so great now. Look at us progressing and building our foundation of our relationship. They are very good at saying exactly what they know you need to hear in order to continue giving them another chance. And again, importantly, abuse is not always physical. You don't have to have bruises, cuts, and scrapes for there to be deep, lasting harm being done. And I just sending that message out there for anyone who might need to hear it, especially anyone younger, anyone who hasn't been through this before, who is still out there in the world dating, who might be in a relationship now that maybe is like this and you haven't wanted to admit it to yourself. Please just ruminate on these things. And I'm, of course, not a fucking psychologist expert on this. I'm just coming from a place of my own experiences and having read up on these things and doing my own healing process through all of it. Now let's dive into the books that I want to talk about today. First up is A Dowry of Blood. This is a lush, gothic reimagining of Dracula's brides, following his one bride in particular, Constanta. And it masterfully depicts the insidiousness of emotional abuse and manipulation. It really captures the chilling, slow erosion of a person's autonomy in a controlling relationship. Constanta is slowly realizing that she is trapped by the very man who once saved her. Very early on, he warns her, "I should not attempt to forge any friendships outside of our home. You warned me. They would only end in heartbreak." The isolation, trying to get you isolated. And eventually isolates her so thoroughly that she feels that her own joy, her own feelings of joy, are dangerous. She says, Vienna made you irritable precisely because I was in bloom, because there were suddenly so many sources of joy in my life apart from your presence. And I feel like this book also captures the whiplash of a relationship like this very well. At one point, she says, you were looming over me in a way that usually made me feel protected, but was now having an entirely different effect. As well as showcasing the guilt tripping that is used as a tactic in relationships like this, making survivors blame themselves. Had I earned your total abandonment with my dalliance with Han, or Hanny, I'm not sure about that name, with my wandering eye for the city and its charms, I ruminated over my every indiscretion, chewing my nails bloody and wandering aimlessly from room to room. That anxiety of like, what did I do wrong? What have I done? Why is he so upset? Oh my God. Ugh. This I also really resonated with personally. You loved me for my will to survive. You coaxed that tenacity out of me and broke it down in your hands. That was a big thing in my situation, praising my strength, my inner strength, my emotional strength, knowing I'm very proud of my inner strength, my emotional strength. But then flipping it around, anytime I talked about leaving or talked about the relationship being bad and the behavior being bad, then it was like, oh, you're not that strong, I guess. Like that type of language, that type of thought process being spewed at me. And again, like, I hope we all understand what it feels like to have heightened emotions, right? To be upset, to be feeling emotional, to be feeling angry, confused, whatever. And then you're in this argument that feels just like a mind fuck, and someone is saying this shit to you, and like, that's what I mean. You get like so confused and turned around in your own head and manipulated because they're good at it. A prime example of the whole you should be my peace. Your irritation was manifest now, warning me to mind my place. I was there to ornament your home and soothe your mind, not bludgeon you with questions. Another thing that resonated with me in this book is Dracula is very suspicious and very paranoid, yet he is clearly having his own dalliances. And actually Constanta isn't. She's not like being unfaithful to him. He's being unfaithful to her and lying to her. But then when she questions him, nothing untoward has been going on between Magdalena and I, and I'm frankly surprised by your suspicions. You sound paranoid, Constanta. Turning it around, again, flipping the shit right back around on you, and you're like, wait, what? No, I have justification. Soon the suspicion that you had not been entirely honest began to gnaw at me. Despite the joy of a life shared with you and Magdalena, I was suspicious, and even more dangerously, I was curious. Curiosity is very dangerous when you're with someone like this. And again, talking about the cycle, I just wanted to get away from the life we had built together, from the cycle of brutality and tenderness. I just think this book does a very good job showing how love, or falsified love, and fear can coexist. And how small, subtle humiliations, isolations, and manipulations compound over time until one day you realize you are living in a fucking nightmare. And it really shows how abusers weaponize affection to keep you under their thumb, not just fear. They don't just use fear as a tactic. The next book, I have talked about this one very recently in a recent wrap-up, Bad Romance by Heather Demetrios. This is a young adult contemporary that is very much showing abuse, what it looks like to get entangled with someone like this. And it's showing abuse through a teenage girl's eyes, really capturing how young, hopeful love can get weaponized. And like in A Dowry of Blood, the narrator, our main character here, is talking to her abuser, blending her memories of his previous affection and how she fell for him with her new understanding of the situation in its reality. I talked about this before. It does a very good job, and I think it's why I absolutely recommend it to especially anyone younger, any teenagers in your life, especially young girls, but young adults as well. She is saying things like this and reflecting back. She's talking about, like, if I was writing the play of our lives or our musical of our relationship, I would want the audience to really get how I was able to fall for you, hook, line, and sinker. Girls don't fall in love with manipulative assholes who treat them like shit and make them seriously question their life choices. They fall in love with manipulative assholes who treat them like shit and make them seriously question their life choices, who they think are knights in shining armor. And then she says, I want to go back through us piece by piece. I want to remember why I was so ooey gooey crazy in love with you. I want to know why it's taken me this long to figure out that you're poison. And then just throughout, she does that. She's talking about the story, but she interjects it with things like this. I will later hear that Summer had broken up with you, a girl that her abuser dated before her, that you'd gone to her house and sobbed on her front porch and said you would do it. You'd kill yourself. And she kept that door closed on you anyway. It will take me a long time, over a year, to see that her dumping you was an act of bravery. The guys can't believe Summer was stupid enough to break up with you. You walk on water for them too. And then later, I don't know this yet, but these moments between us are choreography for the movie of your life. But right now, a boy is staring at me from the end of the hall, and even though he doesn't say a word, he has claimed me. I'm new territory and you've planted your flag. This is one of my favorite lines from this book. I blush, pleasure blooming inside my chest. I don't know it now, but there will be a garden inside me soon, and it will grow thorns. Just such a great depiction of that feeling of falling and feeling like all the butterflies and you're gonna have a garden inside of you of flowers, but it's gonna grow thorns. It's going to end up hurting you, actually. She says things like, you made me feel lucky to be chosen. You made me think I was saving you. And there's a quote from her abuser where he says, I'm trying to save you from me. If you saw the real me, you might not want. And then he fades off dramatically. And she's like, no, 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 I totally want you. You're amazing. And that is a huge tactic. The I'm so damaged and broken, nobody could ever love me. Prove that you can love me. Prove I'm lovable. They use that so well. They don't say those words of prove that you love me necessarily. Sometimes they might, but like they're using your compassion and your care and your empathy against you. I also really appreciate this book for how it showcases the mindfuck of it all, showing why it is so hard to leave, the guilt you feel for abandoning this person who needs you, and in some cases, genuinely, like, they're probably going to spiral out of control. They might do something they shouldn't do. They're definitely threatening to do something to harm themselves. And that guilt that you feel of like feeling responsible for them, and just the overall confusion of your own emotions and thoughts, and the feeling of just like being trapped inside your own head sometimes. Another quote I love is, you're a maze, all high hedges and endless loops. I can't find a way out, can't see where I've been. It's all running, lost in the dark of you, trapped. Everywhere I turn is a dead end. I keep winding up back where I've started. Just, oh, so good. And I think it shows how emotional manipulation and love bombing aren't always super obvious right at first, especially if you are very young or inexperienced. And I think that this book just shows really well how confusing it all can be without romanticizing it. Then we have In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. This is a memoir, and it tells the story of an abusive relationship between two women, highlighting how abuse is not necessarily limited by gender. It is at times heartbreaking, it's very honest, and it really showcases the kind of, I guess, psychological devastation that you can feel once you finally realize the truth of the relationship you're in and are able to leave. And I think it did a very good job of capturing how emotional abuse builds your anxiety, your self-doubt, and this desperate need to prove your love. She writes, this is where the tenacity of love is practiced. Its tensile strength, its durability. You are being tested and you are passing the test. Sweet girl, sweet self. Look how good you are. Look how loyal. Look how loved. As well as, the Gothic heroine, film scholar Tanya Modletsky says, tries to convince herself that her suspicions are unfounded, that since she loves him, he must be trustworthy, and that she will have failed as a woman if she does not implicitly believe him. This really resonated with me because so much of the core reason, in my opinion, that I ended up in the situation I was in and how he was able to manipulate me was because of this deep-seated need I had to never, ever again be accused of being the cold, heartless bitch. Never wanting to be yelled at for lying about my feelings for someone, for leaving someone for what they deemed to be not a good enough reason because I'm just so heartless and cold. I cared way too much about my glowing reputation of like, this great girl. I knew I was I'm not a perfect person, of course, but like as far as a girlfriend, 10 out of 10 girlfriend. Loyal, faithful, kind, compassionate, caring, all those things. Not mean, not cruel, all those things. But I cared way too much about maintaining that reputation in their mind whenever the relationship was done. And this book also very expertly depicts the constant accusations and intense paranoia that these narcissistic abusers can showcase. Thinking you are trying to, wanting to, thinking about, sleeping with literally everyone. And she talks about, like, she's a professor or something like that. She works in a university and having a student who's very promising, but like finding herself no longer wanting to talk about this student because she knew that her girlfriend was going to accuse her of having a crush on them and wanting to fuck them. Like anyone that she talked about too much. It was paranoia all the way around. And ooh, I felt that to my core. In my situation, it got so bad that I would not want to go out in public with him because literally standing in a crowd of random strangers in a public place and just like looking around absent-mindedly would equate to an accusation of who you looking for. You trying to find your boyfriend? Is your boyfriend fucking meeting you here or something? Like, just... And all the time. Like, it wears you down so much. It is... I can't explain how mentally and emotionally fucking draining dealing with that is day in and day out. It's so exhausting. And she also describes very well the feeling of walking on eggshells, that anxiety building up where she says you feel like the most scrutinized person in the world. Everything you do is being questioned. Literally looking at your phone. Who are you talking to? Well, let me see. Prove it. Blah, blah, blah. You're always doing this, you're always doing that. Starting a booktube channel. Who are you trying to meet? Blah, blah, blah. Like, it's, oh my God. And like, you start to just build up this anxiety and like this feeling of walking on eggshells, like you've done something wrong, even when you have not done anything wrong. Like you're trying to hide things, but there's nothing that needs to be hidden. Like in her example, like not wanting to talk about this student and that feeling of like, I'm hiding this from her. And then it makes me look guilty, but if I tell her point blank, she's still gonna think I'm guilty. No matter what I do, I am guilty. And also the gaslighting, which is a term that I could go off about how incorrectly people use this term. It does not just mean people making up stories about you. It does not mean someone has just like their side of a story of like, well, from their perspective, they saw it as me being mean. I don't think I was being mean. They're gaslighting me. No, that's not what the fuck it means. In this case, the example she gives is a time where there's a fight and her girlfriend is literally throwing things, chasing her throughout the house. She's terrified. She goes and locks herself in the bathroom. Her girlfriend's banging on the door, screaming at her, eventually gives up and like leaves, and she sits in the bathroom for a good long while, crying, sobbing, freaking out, terrified. After some time of like not hearing any noise, is like, okay, goes out, and her girlfriend's just chilling on the couch, staring off into nothing, and says, "What's wrong? Why do you look so upset?" And then later is just like acting like it was not a big deal. And like, what are you talking about? That, like, saying that it didn't happen. I don't remember that. I don't remember saying that. There were so many times where I was like, oh my God, I'm taking crazy pills. Literally 2 seconds ago, you just said XYZ to me. And then he'd be like, I never said that. I never fucking said that. Why are you trying to fucking make me a liar? Blah, blah, blah. Why are you making things up? Why are you putting words in my mouth? And I'm like, I'm not. I am quoting you word for word. I'm not even paraphrasing what you said. It is literally what you just said, and vehemently denying it. I never said that. I never fucking said. Like, it makes you just feel like an insane person. And reading that scene genuinely almost like triggered me a little bit. There were several times in my experience where I would go to the guest room and like shut myself in there to try to just distance myself from it, being like, we need to de-escalate this and you're not letting me. I'm trying to leave and put space between us and you're just following me around the house. So I would go in there, but then he'd be banging down the door and like yelling and threatening. And if you don't open the door, I'm gonna XYZ. All I want to do is talk. What, are you so afraid of me? Blah, blah. And I would have to sit there like, what's the smarter choice here? What's the safer choice? Keeping the door shut until he just gets escalated and escalated and escalated and probably will break the door down. And then who knows what? Or opening the door and hoping that he's not so escalated that it's a problem. And this is not fun. It's not fun. And then turning it around too and being like, why are you acting so scared of me? What did you actually, why are you hiding from me? Why are you locking yourself in a room? You think I'm actually gonna do something? Like, how very dare you be afraid of me while you're looming over me, yelling at me, bro? Like, and she just captures that like walking on eggshells feeling perfectly, and that gaslighting perfectly. And then she talks about when you do finally get out. And people say those types of things like, oh, they seemed so nice. Are you sure it was that bad? Oh, you know, he's such a good friend and such a good dude. She must be crazy or dramatic. Sounds like it was just a toxic relationship. It takes two to tango. Shit like that. She doesn't have those quotes necessarily, but it's just, that is part of it too. That's part of what you have to like heal from and like accept, is that there are going to be, especially people who were in your life, people who are friends with your abuser themselves, people who are never going to call it what it was, who are always going to look at you like you're crazy and, oh God, she's a little insane, I guess, or she's super spiteful and bitchy. She's just mad because they broke up, and believing whatever he's telling them about how the relationship was, believing that you cheated on him a bunch of times and that he cheated on you too, which he never admitted to you, but you knew he did, and you never cheated on him, not once, not even close, but like that's the story being told about you, and you have to like process that. And that was really hard for me, being able to like process and accept that there are people out there who have this story of me in their heads that is so wildly fucking wrong, but I can't do anything about it. And I need to like just let it be what it is and not care. And that took some time. That definitely took some time. Moving on to Annybot by Sierra Greer. This book uses science fiction to tell a very human story about emotional abuse. In this one, we have one of our main characters, Doug, who purchases a bot, an Annybot, and she's our main character. Doug's manipulation of Annie starts very early. Annie feels responsible, because she technically is responsible, for managing Doug's emotions and his happiness. This is a hallmark of abuse, though, in real life with real human women and human people, where you feel guilt-tripped when your abuser is displeased. There's a quote where she says, his inexplicable displeasure is real to her, a 7 out of 10. It is, in fact, intolerable. So she's been conditioned and programmed to prioritize fixing his moods over her own well-being. She sits there having this like anxiety about how to fix it. That's all she can think about. She's not gonna be able to sleep. She is gonna let her battery drain out because she has to figure out how to fix this. And he uses guilt to control her time and time again. He drops a spoon in the sink with a clatter. You know how to make me feel like a real shit, don't you? Once again, this is the experience in a real life abusive relationship. Abusers like to turn anything and everything around on you so you feel bad for them feeling bad, for calling them out or pointing out a flaw or whatever the case may be. In this case, Annie Bot was saying she would do what he had asked of her, which was to vacuum under all the furniture, because he had like lashed out and been like, you didn't even clean, you need to vacuum under all the furniture. And so she's like, okay, I'm gonna do that now. And then that's his reaction. He clearly felt like shit for his emotional outburst, realizing how rude and demanding and just mean he was. But instead of acknowledging that and apologizing for it and changing the behavior, he turned it around like it was her fault that he felt shitty about it. When she wasn't saying anything to try to make him feel shitty. She was literally just like, okay, I'll do what you said. It's insanity. And once again, gaslighting when you show fear. He says, look at you. Are you afraid of me? Why? Have I ever hit you? And my ex liked to say that. There was physical abuse, but he never left any marks or bruises or cuts or anything like that. So because there wasn't evidence of his manhandling of me, putting his hands on me in various ways with physical aggression and violence, then it wasn't that bad. And like, I had no reason to be so afraid. Look, I've never actually hurt you. I've never hit you in the face, which still doesn't make it cool or okay, obviously. At one point, Annie thinks, you want to know danger? Try living with a man who creates you just so he can eat your soul. She bites her tongue and glares out the window. Christy once said nobody owned what was inside Annie, but that wasn't true. Doug permeated the circuitry of her mind. He set the parameters and funneled every impulse into serving him. He made her rage impermissible. She has it now, that's for certain. She's alive with rage. And that really resonated with me too, making your rage impermissible. You are not allowed to be angry with them. You're not even allowed to call their behavior abuse. How dare you call it abuse? And yeah, this all just felt very real to me. This constant fear of doing anything wrong and never knowing what you did wrong because you didn't actually really do anything wrong, and just setting off these fights out of nowhere, it felt like. And that every time I felt fear, I was made to feel guilty for it, or he tried to make me feel like I was being ridiculous, trying to make him out to be some monster, exactly like Annie experienced. And when Annie finally leaves, it is quiet, simple. There's no dramatic confrontation. She just leaves and there's no revenge arc. It's just a switch flipping and her choosing herself. In particular, I kind of wanted to talk about what I think people get wrong when talking about this book in particular. I have seen readers criticize this book saying Doug wasn't even that bad. Annie didn't show enough growth. It felt unfeminist that she just left. Doug doesn't get what he deserves. Alternatively, some people think he wasn't that bad. Some think she should have murdered him. And then I've seen some criticisms of how she leaves and saying that she didn't free herself through her own strength of will, because in this story, she literally has a switch flipped that allows her full freedom and autonomy. And that's when she's able to leave. And my thoughts on this criticism is just like, yes, in this story, the woman is a literal robot, truly programmed to behave and obey. So she has to have a switch turned off in order to be able to fully leave. But personally, I just found this to be very cathartic and honestly realistic to how, in my experience, it felt to leave once I decided to actually leave and fully be done. I tried to leave a few times before the final, no, I'm actually done. And when you get to that point, it feels like you have been living in a programmed dream for so fucking long. And then a switch flips and you are able to actually finally leave and to stay gone. You finally have enough freedom in your own mind and your own heart to do whatever it takes to get the hell away and to stay away. It feels like a switch. For me, it did anyways. Just this final like, nah, fuck it, I'm done. And I think from what I have seen and heard from other people, like that is the reality a lot of times. And leaving is enough. Surviving is enough. And abusers often, most of the time in real life, they don't face consequences, especially if it is just emotional and mental abuse and there's not really physical abuse happening, or not enough physical abuse happening, or there's not evidence of the physical abuse happening. They continue on their lives in their delusion, their reality, while survivors carry the trauma. And I don't know, when I've heard people saying Annie just leaves and that it's boring, that it's a boring story, to me this echoes the same dismissive rhetoric survivors hear in real life. If it were me, I would have left sooner. I'd fight back. It doesn't seem that bad. Like, it's so boring to just leave, like, because it's so easy. So that's not exciting. And like, oh, I can't explain how that like feels to hear people saying that about a story like this. It's just like, seriously? When you have been systematically broken down mentally and emotionally for years, just leaving is an act of rebellion. It is freedom. And I loved that Annie Bot portrayed it that way. When I left my abuser, it was a little dramatic because he was throwing shit out on the curb at 3 o'clock in the morning and I had to find somewhere to go. But ultimately, the me deciding to leave wasn't this big cinematic thing, and there was no revenge. There was no getting back at him other than being gone. Annie's eventual escape is simple and it is quiet, but it is still powerful. Leaving is enough. It is not boring. It is survival. Think about what you're saying when you're talking about stories, talking about this topic. And I can definitely understand if like an incorrect expectation was set, which I think the marketing in general for this probably did not do it any favors. If you were expecting this to be this dramatic sci-fi piece of fiction, and especially if you were expecting it to be like a lot of sci-fi that talks about sentient AI or sentient robot. And a lot of those types of stories, the thematic focus is on like a robot learning what it means to be human and what does it mean to be human and oh, this and that. That's not the story. This story is what it is to be in an abusive relationship, what it is to be controlled through the lens of a fucking sentient AI robot who is literally owned and controlled and programmed. So it's just through that lens. So I can understand if like people didn't have that expectation going into it, but I mean, it says in the synopsis that it's talking about abuse. So I urge people to think about what they're saying. Also, I saw some comments saying that it seemed like the author was trying to give Doug a redemption arc and people finding that problematic. I implore you to ask yourself, what about this felt like you were supposed to feel sympathy or positively toward Doug? Because to me, that just sounds like someone who is not educated on this and hasn't experienced it. And because to me, nothing about him seemed redeemable. His nice guy routine up till the end and being oh so generous to allow her her freedom and all of that felt manipulative through and through to me. He was only willing to allow her to have her freedom because he fully believed she was emotionally and mentally still under his control. He literally says like, I've given you a little leeway here and there and you always come back. So that's why I feel like I can trust you to not leave. Abusers in real life obviously know that their partners fundamentally have free will and autonomy, but similarly to Doug, they believe that this person is not going to leave them. They know deep down that they have emotional and mental control over this person. So yeah, nothing about how all that played out to me felt like we're trying to give Doug a redemption arc. To me, that just feels like you misunderstand what abusers are and can look like and behave and the tactics that they use, which is okay. And like, you're not a horrible bad person, but like, think about these things and just listen. Listen to people who have experienced it and what they say about stories like this. And now let's talk about It Ends With Us and where I think it fails. This book definitely shows many red flags right from the get-go. controlling behavior, stalking, gaslighting, emotional and physical violence, but it kind of romanticizes the abuse instead of truly condemning it. And I think more harmfully and more like obviously to me, it just doesn't reflect on it enough. Even when it isn't romanticizing the abuse, sometimes it is, but even when it isn't, it's not like actually talking about it. It's not reflecting back like these other ones do, saying how I fell in love with you or like how wrong I was. All these signs that I did not see at the time and now I see them looking back. We don't do that here. We just show them falling in love. And so an alarming, a problematic, harmful number of book reviewers who talk about this book are bamboozled right along with our main character. And again, if you've experienced this shit before, you won't be. You'll see it right from the get-go. Immediately, I was like, this dude sucks. And in the Dream House talks about this too. She talks about after that experience, like the sixth sense you get for someone who's like that. And you're so hyper aware now. So when I read It Ends With Us, immediately I was like, I clocked that shitty behavior right from the get-go. But there's an alarming number of young women, especially, who are like, I fell in love with him and then the author like pulled the rug out from under me and he's abusive? What are you talking about? It's scary. It's scary. I'm not saying they're stupid for thinking that, but I'm pissed at the book for not doing a better job of talking about it. Because even if the book did that, where like more subtle and like, we're not going to talk about it, but then once it's there and in your face and once it's like, oh shit, he's abusive, let's now go back and look at those early red flags. But we don't. We don't do that. When they first meet, stalking right up front. Do you have any idea how many doors I've knocked on to find you? Knocking on all these doors in her apartment building until he finds her. Crazy town. Crazy town. And definitely love bombing to the extreme. For the past week, I haven't been able to get you out of my head. I don't know why. At work, at home, all I can think about is how crazy it feels when I'm near you. And I need you to make it stop, Lily. He stops pacing and faces me. Please make it stop. Just once. That's all it'll take. I swear. He's like begging her to fuck him. And at one point literally begs on his knees. And like, it's just ridiculous. And then love bombing again, wanting to meet her mother immediately, pretty much. And her saying to her mom, this is actually the first time we've been to dinner together. My mother raises an eyebrow. Really? She says, leaning back in her seat. He sure doesn't treat it like that. I mean, he seems comfortably affectionate with you. Not normal behavior with someone you've just met. And she just kind of brushes it off like, no, And then him saying, Lily, I think I like you too much. Too much? That doesn't sound like a compliment. That's because I don't know if it is, he says. He adjusts my legs on either side of him and then wraps his arms around my waist. This is my first real relationship. I don't know if I'm supposed to like you this much yet. I don't want to scare you away. Simultaneously love bombing, like you're just so amazing and incredible and I've never felt this way. But also the manipulation of like, I don't want to scare you away. And then her response being, I'm not scared. No. Be closer. Don't push me away. Like, I'm not scared at all. Like the manipulation, the getting you reeled in. And then showing fear and pain mixed with moments of tenderness and passion. The extremes. The like bipolar nature of the relationship. We're both upset and kissing and confused and sad. I've never felt anything like this moment. So ugly and painful. But somehow the only thing that eases the hurt just caused by this man is this man. My tears are soothed by his sorrow. And like, that's a very real experience that these types of relationships have. And then we have Lily just blaming herself and rationalizing his behavior. And she just constantly portrays the love she feels as the reason that she keeps going back and giving him another chance. But we don't show the manipulation that has created that false love. Like, it's not genuine, real love. It is this charming facade wrapped up in manipulation that has you feeling this way. And we don't talk about that here. And then at one point he pushes her down the stairs and gaslights her about it, telling her you fell, and then justifying it with all this, I didn't process that there were stairs around us. I didn't even know what I was doing. I didn't process my own strength compared to yours. Sometimes I get emotional and I just kind of see black. I go crazy. Ugh. As if that makes it okay. Then he gets super remorseful and pained about what he's done. Another tactic. Lily, I fucked up. You're my wife. I'm supposed to be the one who protects you from the monsters. I'm not supposed to be one. He holds me with so much desperation he begins to shake. I have never in all my life felt so much pain radiating from one human. It breaks me. It rips me apart from the inside out. All my heart wants to do is wrap tightly around his. Manipulating via that whole I'm so broken, I'm so damaged, and I need you. You are good for me. You care for me and you make me feel better about myself. Oh my God. But once again, we have an example here, but we don't say that it's manipulation. We don't call it manipulation tactics at all. And at one point when he's literally physically abusing her, she says, he's not Ryle. But yes, he is. This is him. And this book does not point these things out, like I keep saying. It does not have the character reflect on this and say, actually, yeah, that was him. This is him. He is an abuser currently, and until he goes to therapy by choice or does some real intensive work to heal his own trauma for himself, there's no chance of him changing and being better for me. And then this whole, I refuse to give up on my marriage that easily. He never should have pushed me, but I also did things I wasn't proud of. And if I would have just left, would that not be going against our marriage vows? For better or for worse, I refuse to give up on my marriage that easily. But then later, when she's kind of getting at her limit, she says, for better or for worse, fuck that shit, with a period after each word. And I just don't think that this is as empowering or as helpful as Colleen Hoover must have thought. My mother said to me toward the end of my situation, when I was starting to be a little bit more honest about the things that were going on, and when his own mother was telling me, he's abusive to you. Love my son, he's always my son, and she told him too, you're abusive to her. And she told me, you need to leave. And my own mom was like, yeah. And I talked to my mom because my ex would always say things like that. If you love me so much that you think you could marry me, then what about for better or for worse? Love means loving all of someone, even their flaws and their mistakes. If you leave them, that isn't love. You don't really love me. Blah, 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 that type of shit. And my mom, at one point, I vividly remember her saying, if you're talking about for better or for worse, the worse that you're dealing with isn't supposed to be your partner and how they treat you. It's supposed to be things that life throws at you, at the two of you. Difficulties like sickness, financial issues, raising children together, navigating life together. It doesn't mean you have to put up with abuse from your partner. That is not what the worse in for better or for worse should be. And that was a pivotal conversation for me. Clearly, I still remember it in my journey out of that relationship. And personally, I don't know about you, but I think that is a hell of a lot more empowering and helpful than fuck that shit for better, for worse. I don't know. Again, we're not having a conversation that is helpful to anyone by just having our characters say, fuck that shit. Cool. And even after he literally sexually assaults her, she frames it as him being broken, not as him making a choice to fucking hurt her. And I also found some people criticized Annibot because when she leaves, she goes to this other man that's like a friend that she met one time. But in Annibot, she's a literal fucking robot who doesn't have friends and has been literally stuck in this house this whole time except one time when she met this other person. And so to me, that wasn't she left him simply because she had another man waiting. It was this is just the only other human being she knows who could maybe help her. She's completely on her own. She has nothing. She has no money. She doesn't have a place to live. She's homeless. To me, that is different. She literally did not have other options, and it just happened to be a man. And maybe she'll be in a relationship with him, but I didn't find that problematic. However, in this, I did find it a little harmful, the rhetoric here, the narrative, that she's only really able to leave Ryle fully when she knows she has Atlas waiting in the woodwork for her. And then I also, the separation, when she separates from him, I just think that was probably the most, aside from not reflecting on the early red flags, this is like the other most harmful thing to me. She leaves, their separation, but then she's like feeling emotional toward him still. There's one point where he comes, that's another thing too. He is being very like tame and kind and understanding and like allowing her space and giving her space and respecting her boundaries, which is not how that goes. When you are with a narcissistic abuser, when you leave, that post-separation time is crazy time. They are harassing you, stalking you, being just crazy, crazy town. And if you see them in person, it's not this amicable, nice little convo in the like weeks and months after, sometimes for years, depending on the situation. But in this case, he is just like fully respecting her. This man who has sexually assaulted her, abused her physically as well as emotionally and mentally. And now he's just like, okay, yeah, sure. And he comes over to help build a crib and is just like, fine. No, that's not how that would fucking go. But then she's like, he looks so good. I have an urge to run down the hallway and jump into his arms. And that is not how that feels. In real life, when you're done with an abuser, like I said, it feels like a switch flips. When you are truly well and good and done. Like the final separation, not the times leading up to it. You get pulled back in, yes. But when you're actually finally done, you don't want to run into their fucking arms again. You want to breathe. You feel this relief that they're not in your life like that anymore. And even if maybe you don't want to see them run over by a car or something and you still like don't, wish you the best, dude, but like over there, you don't feel these like loving feelings toward them. Again, in my experience and the experience of other friends and women that I know who we've talked about it. No group of people, no experience is a monolith, but I just think it's especially problematic in this case because it's very much like an idyllic version of what it's like to leave an abuser. That is not what it is like. And I don't think it helps anyone to have this like little fantasy version of what this looks like, what leaving a narcissistic abuser finally looks like. Why do we need to fantasize this and like make it idyllic? No, I don't think that's good or helpful. And then there's this quote. I read somewhere once that 85% of women return to abusive situations. That was before I realized I was in one. And when I heard that statistic, I thought it was because the women were stupid. I thought it was because they were weak. I thought these things about my own mother more than once. But sometimes the reason women go back is simply because they're in love. I love my husband. I love so many things about him. And this is so problematic to me. They don't go back because they are truly in love. They go back because they have been manipulated into feeling like they are so in love. Some have been manipulated into feeling like they're worthless without this person. That was not my experience, but a lot of people who are in narcissistic, abusive relationships, they have been convinced that no one else will ever love them or love them the way this person loves them. And that how their abuser feels about them is love, which it is not, obviously. And some have been manipulated into being convinced that they love their abuser more than they actually do. And some, like me, are manipulated into feeling like you have to prove that you meant it when you initially said how much you love them, and not wanting to be called a liar by choosing to leave. It's not because there's just so much love there that you keep going back. Like, shut the fuck up. No. This book just really frames Ryle as a good man who sometimes does bad things, reinforcing this myth that abusers are just misunderstood or they just have so much trauma of their own. Don't you feel bad for them? Like, yeah, that sucks that they have trauma that is unhealed and sometimes really intense, terrible things have happened to them that probably most likely created this storm of shitty behavior. But That doesn't mean we have to fucking stay with them and sympathize with them and feel all sorry for them and like, oh, he's just misunderstood. A misunderstood, damaged boy. No. And there's a quote where she says, "It's easy when we're on the outside to believe that we would walk away without a second thought if a person mistreated us." True. It's easy to say we couldn't continue to love someone who mistreats us when we aren't the ones feeling the love of that person. Sort of true. When you experience it firsthand, it isn't so easy to hate the person who mistreats you when most of the time they're your godsend. Talk about the manipulation. Oh my God. They aren't actually your godsend. You have just been manipulated into feeling that way about them. Explain this. There's too many people, there's too many young women reading this book, and this book isn't explaining this shit. In reality, if someone hurts you, minimizes it, and continues to repeat it, they are an abuser. Full stop. I just feel like It Ends With Us tells a false narrative that abusers, we should feel sorry for them and all this sympathy extended toward them because they're just misunderstood. People who sometimes do bad things. And I feel like these other books tell the truth, in my opinion. Only the abuser can choose to heal themselves. And unfortunately, a lot of the time, they won't. And you cannot convince them to. Just don't try. So just in conclusion, wrapping this up finally, I personally just feel like good fiction that is talking about abuse doesn't just show the drama and dramatizing it for storytelling reasons. It shows the slow erosion of yourself, the traps laid by these manipulation tactics that narcissistic abusers use, and the mental and emotional confusion and mind fuckery that keeps survivors stuck for so long. And stories like A Dowry of Blood, Bad Romance, In the Dream House, and Antibot validate the truth of surviving abuse. And they don't just show abuse happening and, oh, if you know, you'll catch it. They show why it can be so hard to leave, how the manipulation tactics can work, and what healing can look like, what healthy healing is and can look like. Abusive relationships are very complicated, painful, and very messy. And these books also show that survivors are not stupid or weak. Because, like I said, surviving an abusive relationship isn't a matter of strength or weakness. I am and always have been a very strong-minded, strong-willed person, intelligent, not this like naive, gullible, little silly idiot or something. And I still found myself in a situation like this because it's not just about that. And I will just end it with the dedication to A Dowry of Blood, where she says, "To those who escaped a love like death, and to those still tight in its grasp," I'm gonna get choked up again. I always do every time I read this. "To those who escaped a love like death, and to those still tight in its grasp, you are the heroes of this story. You are not alone, you are not broken, and you deserve peace." Apologies for what I'm sure is an incredibly lengthy video, but if you have watched until the end, I so appreciate it. Thank you so much. I hope you found this enjoyable, maybe educational if you're, less educated on these things, helpful, cathartic if you are also a survivor or are still in a situation like this. Like I said, it can happen to anyone. As always, I thank you so much for your time. Hope you all have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.